Now, we also had a hearing yesterday that went on for a number of hours. It was an important hearing, and I know there were people that kept talking about, gee, there have been 7 hearings or 8 hearings, whatever there have been, or 7 or 8 investigations. None of them had the documentation that is now only starting to be obtained from a recalcitrant State Department and Obama administration. Yeah, it's easy to get an okay when you don't turn over the documents that show lie after lie, misrepresentation. Yeah, it's easy. All you do is just don't let anybody see the documentation for the misrepresentations that came. Now, my staff said you got to read this article, and it uses the L word a number of times, the L word being lie. It uses that a number of times, but I don't want to even come close to getting in trouble for violating any rule here on the House floor because the content's too important. So we'll just say, instead of lies, we'll just call them unfortunate wrong statements. So with that substitution, and then I found out, gee, it's my friend Ben Shapiro that wrote this. Hope that doesn't hurt Ben that I mentioned we're friends. But anyway, Hillary Clinton's 5 biggest unfortunate mistaken representations in her Benghazi testimony. Down in the article, it points out Hillary is the poor, put-upon victim of a vast right-wing conspiracy. Because, Mr. Speaker, I know you'll remember back in the 90s when her husband was accused of doing things that it turned out he really did, instead of making clear her husband had made mistakes and she had made it clear there would be no more, she went after the women. She had a war on women and went after any women who actually accused her husband of impropriety, and even used and coined that phrase, this vast right-wing conspiracy, during her war on women who just tried to point out what her husband had done to them. But the article says she set up a private email server and deleted relevant emails from it for purely political reasons. She pressed for a pointless invasion of Libya for political reasons, chortled at its conquest for political reasons, watched it descend into chaos while doing nothing for political reasons, and then allowed her ambassador to twist in the Libyan tornado without proper security for political reasons. Finally, she covered up that disaster by lying about its causes for political reasons. But those who ask questions about such matters are partisan politicians. The article goes on further down. Hillary kept claiming that she cared deeply about her good friend Chris Stevens. At one point, she whipped out her pre-planned righteous indignation to complain, quote, "I would imagine I thought more about what happened than all of you put together. I've lost more sleep than all of you put together." This was salt in the wound, the equivalent of Johnny Cochran lamenting his worries over the fate of Nicole Brown Simpson. And I've got to inject at this point, I was there for a good bit of the hearing because a friend, a real patriot, she's served in the Navy. It's where she met a guy named Ty Woods, one of the greatest American patriots this country could ever hope to have as a son. She married Ty. They'd even had another child right before, not just months before, he found himself in Benghazi, and another former Navy SEAL like Ty that cared more about his country and serving others than his own self-interest came and joined him. So I understand when Ty was getting ready to go to the roof to try to protect those people, he knew David Ubben with the State Department, his former Army Ranger, and David went with him, grabbed an M4. They went to the roof to protect the Americans that were in the building beneath them. I'll never forget reading the name of the first Navy SEAL that this administration released, and the story. Obviously, this language had to come from this administration. It struck me as such a slap face to this former Navy SEAL, because I've known so many Navy SEALs and former Navy SEALs, and proud of everyone I've known, well, maybe except for a former governor who's creating chaos for Chris Kyle's widow. But when I read the words after Glenn Doherty, former Navy SEAL, contractor, and it said from the information released from this administration that he died while taking cover. Now, I didn't know anything about Benghazi at that point, about the specifics, but I knew enough Navy SEALs to know if he died, it wasn't taking cover. It was probably giving cover, or maybe moving to get a better vantage from which to defend other people. That's the Navy SEALs I know, generally speaking. And then we find out he didn't die taking cover. Ty Woods didn't die taking cover. I don't know if that was the State Department's release to try to minimize how heroic those people were because they violated orders and said, we're going to help those people that are pinned down in Benghazi. Those are heroes. And I know my friend Duncan Hunter had moved to try to get a Congressional Medal of Honor. I think it's time we take those back up. They deserve, though they weren't in the military, they deserve the highest honor this body could give them posthumously. And David Ubben, I never brought it up during the months that he had been after I met him out one of my visits out to Bethesda, or Walter Reed combined with it now. But he was up there on the roof. There were 3 mortars that came in. The first one missed. And having been in the Army 4 years, I know they used to teach us, if there are 3 mortars or 3 artillery rounds coming in, then you better move before the 4th one hits, because they'll use those 3 to triangulate your position, and the 4th one will be on top of your head. So when I heard David say there had been 3 mortars coming, I said, oh, so they bracketed you. And he said, oh, no. I don't want you to get the wrong idea. We knew as soon as the first one missed, they knew exactly where our position was. It was short, but there was no question they knew exactly at what angle to put that mortar so that it would come down on our heads, and that's what 2nd and 3rd mortar did. There was no bracketing. They knew their position, pre-planned attack. They had the coordination perfectly, exactly where that mortar needed to be. The first one was short, as he said, but the 2nd and 3rd were right on top of their targets, and that's what killed Glenn and Ty as they were giving cover, not taking cover, giving cover. And in fact, I heard yesterday, it wasn't in the hearing, wasn't said in the hearing, but I heard from somebody who had talked to a Delta Force individual when he heard the name Ty Woods. He said, you know, that guy, England took on a whole city. They didn't care. They were going to protect the United States civil servants that were in the that they went to the roof of, and they gave their lives, giving them cover. David Ubben lost much of his right leg, but after many surgeries, hopefully it's near the point now of being usable. He's a hero. This administration didn't even want to give him the right credit. And then to have them, and Ben Shapiro points it out here, they used this video, and even to say to any one of the survivors, as Ms. Clinton did, we'll get the guy that did the video. They didn't care about the video. I've talked to many of the family members of those who were killed. They didn't care about the guy that did the video. They cared about the people that killed their loved one. Dorothy Woods is a hero. So for Mrs. Clinton to sit there and arrogantly, condescendingly say to the panel, I've lost more sleep than all of you put together, with Dorothy Woods sitting right there, was just another dagger to her heart, because she still loses sleep. And let's go back to that night. We still don't know what Hillary Clinton and our president did specifically after they found out. Either the president was preparing for his fundraiser in Las Vegas the next day, or he just went to bed with his personal ambassador to Libya missing. Either they went to bed or did something far more embarrassing. Be willing to tell us what they did that night. I mean, I was only in the Army 4 years, but I cannot imagine what kind of mind will allow itself to go to sleep or just blow things off and move on to another project when somebody working directly for you has either been killed, you know people have been killed, and the ambassador's missing in a hostile area that turns out begged for security, additional security, 600 times. This is disgraceful. Just disgraceful. It had nothing to do with the video. My friend Jim Jordan said, you tell the American people one thing, you tell your family an entirely different story. And in fact, she told the Egyptian prime minister the day after the attacks, quote, we know the attack in Libya had nothing to do with the film. It was a planned attack, not a protest, unquote. And as I recall, not only was that simply not true, she took State Department funds, as I understand it, and spent tens of thousands of dollars on a commercial to facilitate and to perpetuate this lie, and spent that in foreign Muslim countries, running it on their television to say, we had nothing to do with the video. Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker, and